Hi, this is Captain Doug. I'm doing my first YouTube video today, trying to keep it under 15 minutes. I want to talk about, I brought a sailboat. I sailed my sailboat, a 38-foot fiberglass sailboat, from Mexico to Thailand. A few years ago, I left Mexico in April of 2015, and I arrived in Thailand in December of 2017, about 2.5 years. And did the regular, went through the South Pacific, did the French Polynesian Islands, ended up in New Zealand. New Zealand's a wonderful place, had an extended stay there, back up into Fiji, and then over into Vanuatu, is a very, very cool island, New Caledonia, and then into Australia, and did the coast there. Ended up back into Indonesia, left Thursday Island, Australia, for the Indonesia rally. Went through Indonesia. Indonesia is a large, strung out set of islands, dozens of islands, hundreds of islands. And ended up past Singapore, Malaysia, and then into Thailand, arriving in Thailand in December of 2017. After a few months, pulled the boat out, did some bottom work, was here several months, and decided in the summer of 2018 to return to Colorado, USA, and sell my townhouse. I did that. It was a good seller's market and got a good price for my townhouse. Returned to Thailand. Bought a used Honda CR-V. I got something with high ground clearance because I didn't know what I was to expect for cars or for a road system in Thailand. And actually they have an excellent road system in Thailand with elevated freeways going in many parts of the country. But I was also getting back into paragliding, and I needed something to get to the top of hills and mountains for takeoff. So I got something with some ground clearance. Used cars were a little more expensive here than I expected and what I was used to in America, and so I bought an older used vehicle. So for most of, and we're now into kind of the end of 2018, 2019, I spent largely traveling around the country. I had extended stays in the Chiang Mai area. Did an English TEFL course, teaching English as a foreign language course there. Did some meditation retreats and flew off some of the paragliding sites there. And then traveled over much of the rest of the country. Ended up on the eastern side of things, Isan area, Konkan, made many stops there. One of the things I was doing was looking at the water system. People were reporting real low water levels, and in fact, some of the dams, in fact, were half full or less in many parts of the country. So Thailand's not getting the rain in many cases like they have in the past. So that kind of brings us through the rest of 2019. By December, I needed to get back to Phuket, get my boat in a marina so a sailing broker, a yacht broker, could have access to it. I'd been trying to sell the boats basically since I got to Thailand. And so December and January, by January of 2020, there's some talk of a virus going around. Thailand had received many, many Chinese tourists in the past, and Phuket in particular saw lots of tourists come to go on snorkeling and boating trips from Chalong Bay. So again, I was in the marina, making the boat available to be sold, and did not find a buyer. So by the end of February now, towards the end of February, my 1-year stay for the boat was coming due, and I needed to take the boat out of the country, at least for a day before returning, and then I could start this 2 6-month periods for temporary importation of the boat fuel through customs. So by the end of February, I had not found a buyer, and so I went ahead and took the boat, did the 2-day trip to Langkawi, Malaysia, and that's typically always a motorboat ride. The winds are never quite what you need to sail on that part of the Amdoan Sea. Got to Langkawi and put it in a marina, got it up on the hard, as we say, and put it in, pulled the sails down. And by that time, Langkawi was very noticeably short of tourists. There's a lot of Chinese tourists and ancestors there in the Langkawi region, and the place was absent of tourists for the most part. So I got the boat out and returned to Thailand fairly shortly after that. And I got settled back into a hotel in the Patong region, and they started talking about locking the borders. So I was really kind of hunkered down in a hotel. I had lots of restaurants in the area, so I thought it would be a good place to be. Well, I wasn't there even a full week, and they started to came in one day and the cable TV wasn't working. So I checked with the front desk, and they said, oh, we had to shut that off. And then I think it was the next day the Wi-Fi went out, and so it's getting kind of obvious. They weren't being very direct and just simply saying you had to get out, but that's what they did. They shut things down, and people that were on short-term visas started to leave the country, most of them. Some did not get out. I have a long-term visa, a retirement visa, so I wasn't kind of pressured to leave. So I moved, found an apartment in a little area called Cherntalay, and was there about a week or so. Bought a microwave, bought a crock pot, bought one of those butane stoves, and because there was talk of a full lockdown between the villages happening, because there was some COVID cases on Phuket. I had a grocery store that I could walk a couple blocks to, and so I had access to food. And they went ahead and did this full lockdown, and to try to isolate the coronavirus case. You know, Thailand's really quite a success story with this COVID-19, and Thailand, like other Asian countries, they've had their pandemics. They had the SARS virus and so forth before, and some other ones. So those were kind of dry runs for this COVID-19. So they made decisions quickly and rapidly, and in hindsight, you know, really eliminated and isolated this virus. Now it really put a stop to tourism, and Thailand is very dependent on tourism. So it's been hard on many people in this country as far as making their livelihoods. But they did control the virus, and I think they did a great job of it. Okay, so so that kind of brings us up to date. I remember thinking that I needed to get back to Malaysia, was getting emails and so forth from people who were interested in seeing the boat. And May 1st kind of looked like a hopeful that might happen. It didn't happen. Then June 1st, I was fairly sure, you know, oh good, this thing's over, and because they brought in the numbers of cases very low already by that time. And so I was looking at, you know, I thought June 1st for sure. I mean, I was ready to book flights, if there were flights to book, which as it turned out there really weren't. We didn't get open back up. July 1st happened, it didn't get open back up. By that time, it's kind of like all hope is lost, you know. And here it is September, and we're still not, Thailand's not open to tourism. So what I wanted to do with this video was talk about some of the programs and hopefully reduce confusion. I may or may not do that, but because these programs seem to keep changing. So I'm going to go over, there's kind of 3 models that were out there and may still be out there in kind of one form or another. In June and July, they were talking about travel bubbles, and it's like, what's a travel bubble? And what it looked like is, as Thailand had really managed and controlled the COVID cases, it sounded like they were looking for other countries that had done similar and really had done well in reducing their COVID cases, and thus people traveling from those countries would be at a reduced risk of carrying that virus with them. So some terminology they used around travel bubbles were ALSQ. It's an alternate local state quarantines. And what this was is you if they opened things up, you could get your visa and you could come in, and you needed to come in right into a 14-day quarantine. So obviously this is not people on 2 weeks of vacation. This is people that are going to stay longer, possibly some business people and so forth that were going to be here a longer time. What they did is they were contracting hotels that originally looked like it was in the Bangkok area. They talked of doing this in Phuket. I think it was still called this ALSQ at that time. And so the hotels had to pair with hospitals that could handle some potential cases that would come in. So you had to have those kind of agreements in place. And a 14-day quarantine might run you about $1,400 on the low end, $100 US a day for your 14-day stay, up to $5,000 US for a 14-day stay. This is 3 meals a day. There's transfers from the hotel, because once you're here and you're in that status, they've got to keep hold of you and get you into quarantine. And so you had 3 meals a day, your hotel expenses, and then your transfers from airport. I don't think that ever got off the ground under that language. What happens with these, they morph and they change the terminology around them and some of the requirements, and it gets called something else, and we've never officially got opened all the way up. So I don't think the ALSQ ever took effect. The next thing I saw, which was slated for October 1st, and I don't believe is on that kind of time frame anymore, was called the 5 T's model. And to again, as a foreigner coming in, flying into Thailand, you were going to 72 hours prior to getting on your flight, you had to be tested and have a certificate saying that you're not positive. You needed to carry a $100,000 US dollar health insurance policy to come in. It's going to be similar to the other quarantine model. You'll be tested at the beginning of the quarantine and towards the end of it. It was part of the regimen. So the 5 T's themselves, the first T is a target tourist, and I've never quite got a breakdown on the definition of what a target tourist was, other than it's this person with a $100,000 health insurance policy and the testing prior to getting on the flight, and then an agreement to be in to 14 days of quarantine. So the second T is testing. The third T is tracing. The phone app they wanted you to use that lets whoever's going to monitor those apps see where everyone is, see that you're in your quarantine area where you're supposed to be at the time you're supposed to be there. The fourth T is treatment. Again, the hotels would work with hospitals with staff, medicine, and equipment to handle any potential positive cases that were coming through. And the fifth T was labeled as trust. There was quite a bit of tension during this time, during the lockdown period, in the blaming of foreigners versus Thai. So there was some bad blood between the two. I think it was the idea of trust, that people coming in understand they're coming into a country that's allowing them to come in, and the locals having a trust that people aren't that will adhere to their quarantines and not create outbreaks of COVID-19. So I don't believe that model ever took place. I don't think that it did. Some people showed up on YouTube saying, this is my experience in a quarantine. It was kind of that time frame. I didn't watch a bunch of those videos, so it may have been that type of protocol, but I'm not sure. It didn't get done large scale, I don't believe. And the latest thing I wanted to share was this latest news that I saw on YouTube from a fellow YouTuber that's here in Thailand. And he talked about a new visa, 90-day visa that they were going to have that was front-loaded with a 14-day quarantine at the beginning, similar kind of parameters. And then after that 90-day visa, you could apply to extend again for 2 more 90-day visas. Now again, this is kind of secondhand sources from another YouTuber, foreigner. And so I'm not getting this from official government sources, but 2 more in 90 days. So you do three sets of 90 is 270 days potential in Thailand. I'm not certain about the fee schedule for that. Again, a timeline one that might start, or the likelihood that that'll actually go into practice. So we're right at 15 minutes. I want to go ahead and wrap up. Subscribe if you've enjoyed this. Give it a thumbs up. If you have, I've touched on several topics quickly and briefly. If there's saying you want to learn about hear more about the sailboat trip, or what is the experience is actually like, been here through lockdown and so forth, or anything like that, let me know, and I can do some future videos. So you guys have a good day. Thanks.